Hey everyone, I just want to preface this video by saying that this video will include spoilers for Resident Evil Requiem, so if you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend you experience this game for yourself and then come back and watch this video. Now, in my opinion, Resident Evil Requiem is a masterpiece, and for me, it might just be the best survival horror game I have ever played, or very close to it. See, I have been a fan of Resident Evil for as long as I can remember. As a kid, I used to love the god-awful live-action movies, and I thought that they were campy, cheap knockoffs, but ultimately they were great. I always loved the ideas behind the franchise. I love how deep the lore went, the iconic characters like Chris, Leon, and Jill. But it wasn't until 2017 that I played one of the games for the first time, and you guessed it, that game was Resident Evil 7, Biohazard. Like me, the game was an entry point for many fans, and for returning fans of the franchise, Resident Evil 7 acted as a return to form, a trip back to true survival horror at its roots, and a saving grace for the franchise that led the games into the mainstream spotlight once again, after seemingly taking the game franchise in the wrong direction for so many years. You see, the series had focused on action horror more than survival horror with the last few entries, so when Resident Evil 7 came out, it hooked me. It instantly became one of my favorite games at the time, and it gave me high hopes for where the series could go. After 7, of course, I played the RE2 remake, the RE3 remake, Resident Evil Village, and finally, way later than I should have, the Resident Evil 4 remake. Though I've never played the classic games myself, I thoroughly enjoyed every entry that I played. I loved every character, the stories each game had to tell, and I loved how every entry felt unique and each stood out on its own, all building off of what the last one did. But none of them had stuck with me like 7. None of them had made me feel the same sense of dread and mystery that 7 did. That was until Requiem. From the opening moments of this game, I was hooked. The way the developers have merged both action and horror through both Leon and Grace's gameplay is nothing short of incredible. It takes the best of both formulas from the series and perfects them. There wasn't a moment in gameplay where I wasn't on the edge of my seat, either sneaking around enemies with little to no resources, or blasting my way through the infected like I was John Wick. The gameplay kept me engaged and captivated the entire run. It was truly fun figuring out where to go, what items went where, and figuring out the puzzles for the first time that were scattered across the Rhodes Hill Care Center. Now, for most of the game, you find yourself trying to escape Rhodes Hill, pursued by the girl, Maria, who hunts you down in the dark areas of the game. You only find safety in the well-lit rooms as the light burns her skin, causing her to flee into the ceilings and walls, only to drop down again in the dark areas and start chasing you again. If you're not sneaking around Maria, you're sneaking around the infected and scavenging for every last resource as Grace, and then following up as Leon, quickly dispatching enemies that tormented Grace through the halls of the facility, slaughtering every enemy like Leon is the Doom guy. Every single zombie throughout the facility was quite unique, showing signs of retained consciousness. They walk the halls of Rhodes Hill, living out their daily habits. Zombies sing and perform their last songs. Orderlies groan about following the rules and switch off any lights you turn on around them. Maids constantly scrub up puddles of blood, screaming about the mess. And even the chef continues to cook in the kitchen, though I'm not sure I want what's on the menu. And then there's this guy, who is constantly trying to eat everything he can get his hands on, never satisfied and always hungry for more. Every enemy in this game is absolutely amazing, and I think they are a fresh twist on the zombie formula that is not only fascinating but terrifying beyond measure in a genre that has become so stale. The game kept me locked in and thinking constantly, what's this item for? Where does this key go? What path is safest to take? And what paths are too risky? All of it was truly mesmerizing, but with all of that said, none of it was as good to me as the story itself. Now, I loved this story. From the very beginning, the entire plot is a complete mystery. I had so many questions going in. Thankfully, most of them were answered by the end, with a few lingering still yet, making me very excited for the future of these games. Now, I won't go too crazy in-depth with the story, but here is a basic rundown. Grace Ashcroft, a technical analyst for the FBI, is tasked with returning to the Renfield Hotel, the place where her mother was murdered 8 years ago. She's there to investigate a case of mysterious murders where the bodies keep exhibiting these strange black bruises all over their bodies. And all of them happen to be survivors of the Raccoon City incident. Going back to the hotel, she very quickly learns her mother, Alyssa Ashcroft from Resident Evil Outbreak, had been hiding something from her. Finding a picture of herself and a key, Grace makes her way through the hotel, eventually finding a journal from her mother and a strange disc. Just then, she's ambushed by a police officer infected with the T-virus. Grace tries to escape but ends up being knocked unconscious and kidnapped by Victor Gideon, a researcher from Umbrella turned Nemesis. At the same time, rookie cop turned legend, Leon Kennedy, is investigating the same strange murders that Grace is. And he is also inflicted with Umbrella's curse, these strange black markings all over his body. He exhibits signs of a T-virus infection, or Raccoon City Syndrome. Leon finds Gideon carrying Grace through the streets of Elbridge, and Gideon escapes after causing an outbreak in the city. Both characters eventually find themselves in the Rhodes Hill Care Facility that acts as a front for Gideon's research and figuring out whatever Elpis is. Each of the characters make their way through this facility and eventually escape, meeting a girl named Emily and a man named Harry, and eventually finding themselves in the ruins of Raccoon City to face the past and hopefully find hope in the horrors that they face. Both villains of the story, Victor Gideon and Zeno, who I'm pretty sure is a Wesker clone, exhibiting some of the Wesker's iconic abilities, were both captivating all the way through, and the twist at the end was the cherry on top for me. See, I chose to release Elpis, and when I got to the final moments and made that decision, all I had was hope that I was doing the right thing, and hope was the whole point, because when Grace released Elpis, it was revealed to be a powerful antiviral, a cure to the T-virus, and Oswald E. Spencer's final secret, along with the fact that Grace is his adopted daughter.
She was alone in the world. I took her in to make amends. Is she perfectly normal? Just an average child needing a home. She is my hope. Aren't you beautiful? Would you like to hold her?
Oh, okay. She's adorable. What's her name?
Grace.
Zeno is killed by Victor Gideon after injecting himself with Elpis, and you have a final showdown with Gideon in a very cool boss fight, being saved by Chris's Wolf Squad at the end. Though I had many questions after the credits rolled, I was quite impressed overall. I really enjoyed this story for what it was, and my only real complaint is I wish it had been slightly longer, as I finished my first playthrough in about 7 hours. Now let's talk about the protagonists of this story, starting with none other than Grace Ashcroft. Now at the beginning of the story, she's very timid, showing clear signs of anxiety and fear from the trauma of her mother's death. She struggles with the weight of the Requiem when Leon hands it to her for the first time. She trips during chase sequences. She reacts to everything around her with utter shock and awe. She feels like a regular person who's just thrust into this nightmare scenario and forced to figure it out. It feels refreshing to have a protagonist that doesn't feel like an empty shell meant for the players to fill. Ethan. But an actual person with meaningful thoughts and feelings. Grace really has to face her fear over the course of the game, and she evolves as a character beautifully. At the start, she's anxious and scared, stuttering and shaky, but then finally she meets Emily. Now, Emily is a blind little girl that Grace finds locked in a high-security cell. At first, the game tries to paint a false image of her, sort of, and it makes the player uncertain whether or not she's dangerous or just a helpless girl. It's especially worse if you've played Resident Evil 7, because my first thought upon meeting her was of Evelyn. Now, Grace eventually helps Emily, letting her out of her cell and carrying her across the facility to a puzzle box. See, the puzzle box is written in Braille, and Grace asks Emily to help her read it. Surviving the horrors of the facility and opening the box for Grace, Emily is abruptly taken by none other than Marie, a monster who I mentioned before that hunts Grace through the dark. Marie drags her through a hole in the floor and down into the basement. Now, even though it was great to tear my way through enemies as Leon as he dropped one-liners left and right, my favorite sections were definitely of Grace. Specifically, this section here in the basement. You see, just after Marie grabs Emily, Grace has to yet again face her fear. After doubting for a second, she turns and she goes through the hole and goes after Emily. The following sections have you sneaking through the basement, being pursued by Marie. You turn the power on and off in various areas as Marie hunts you down trying to eat you. And finally, it all culminates in an epic showdown in a literal meat grinder and blood slide, and a frantic chase sequence with Emily in hand to the elevator to get out of the basement. Marie continues to pursue, trying to grab Grace and ultimately losing her hand, falling back into the basement. This entire sequence was so thrilling. It had me literally screaming at my monitor as I crept through the dark depths of the facility. This is how you do survival horror. Following the intensity of the basement sequence, Grace and Emily eventually escape the facility into the courtyard, where they meet the character Harry. She faces her fear yet again in the lab beneath the facility, as she goes after the helicopter key that Harry asks her to retrieve. Only the entire facility proceeds to collapse on top of her, and then, after taking off in the helicopter and almost escaping, the helicopter crashes almost immediately as well. With Harry dead and Emily severely hurt, Grace makes her way into a warehouse where she has one last showdown with Marie. Grace ends up opening the sunroof on her, killing her. Afterward, Emily seemingly dies from her wounds that she sustained in the helicopter crash, and despite Grace's efforts to resuscitate her, she ends up morphing into another revolting monster. Despite Grace's protests, Leon shows up and puts her down. Now, I figured out early on that Marie and Grace were clones, and that Marie was from the cell next to Emily's. But when Emily died and transformed, only to die again, it broke me in that moment. Truly, that was some emotional storytelling. Watching as Grace evolves from a scared, inexperienced person to a badass in her own right by the end of it, just to save Emily and get answers that captivated her all the way through, it was truly amazing. Following Emily's death, Grace then leaves with Zeno and Gideon, seemingly giving up on her efforts after the trauma of witnessing her die. They take her to the ruins of Raccoon City to get answers for everything that has happened, and seemingly to uncover whatever Elpis is. That's when we switch from mainly playing as Grace throughout the story to mainly playing as Leon. Now, in the very beginning of the game, you play as Leon a handful of times. Through his sections, you get to tear your way through the facility, though these sections are relatively short. That is until you actually reach Raccoon City, where Leon's story really takes off. Now, at this point in the timeline, Leon has been through it. He has survived the Raccoon City incident in '98, Las Plagas in 2004, whatever the heck he did in Resident Evil 6, I don't know, I haven't played it, maybe one day. But all in all, he's been employed by the government fighting against bioterrorism for the better part of 30 years, and it shows. Playing as Leon was extremely fun, and though the action could be repetitive at times, I never found myself bored or wanting more. The gameplay was the perfect blend of action horror that is a clear step up from the gameplay in Resident Evil 4 Remake. You have a huge amount of inventory space, several weapons that you can purchase or upgrade throughout the course of the game. Leon can parry incoming attacks and even chain attacks into brutal finishers. Playing as Leon, I truly felt powerful, and I saw how far he's come since Resident Evil 2. Playing as him again in Requiem was absolutely amazing. Now, Leon's arc was very well written as well. See, from the start of the game, as I said before, he's suffering from Raccoon City syndrome. So Leon is forced to face his past and relive those traumas from the Raccoon City incident all that time ago. As you make your way through the areas like RPD, Leon has flashbacks of all the people he wasn't able to save, and our man is set on saving Grace, even at his own expense. Watching Leon reconcile with his past as he fights his way through the ruins of the city and faces off with Gideon and even a new version of Mr. X in an epic boss fight that is reminiscent of his fight in Resident Evil 2. Leon, making his way through the ruins of Raccoon City, eventually finds himself in Ark, a secret underground facility that was only uncovered after the destruction of Raccoon City in Resident Evil 3, where he eventually saves Grace from Xeno and Gideon. And in the good ending, after Elpis is released and Xeno and Gideon are dead, Leon is cured and reveals to Grace that Emily could still be alive, that he never hit her vitals. And in fact, if you try to shoot her vital organs during the fight, the game doesn't let you. A picture at the end of the game actually confirms that Emily and Grace are together and she seemingly survived. You see, once Elpis was released and after the final boss fight, the facility is collapsing around Leon and Grace, and Chris's Wolf Squad actually comes in and extracts both of them. The last few moments of the game give several hints at what's to come. First is the secret message to Leon, the blatant foreshadowing that Leon and Chris will inevitably meet up, hopefully sooner than later, and then several more short scenes that just kind of foreshadow the Connection's involvement in the series, a shadowy criminal organization that debuted in Resident Evil 7. The ending leaves off on a very good note, and in my opinion was very satisfying for every character. I'm actually forgetting something. Very important, actually. Sherry Birkin? Yeah, that little girl from Resident Evil 2. Well, she's the woman who's on comms with Leon throughout the entire game, giving him information and advice, and also inflicted with the same Raccoon City syndrome. She also was great in this, though I wish we could have seen a little more of her, as I'm very curious to see what she's been up to. Now, the callbacks from Resident Evil 2 I thought were done very well. The returning locations, the iconic characters like Leon, Hunk, who makes an appearance, at least I think that's Hunk, Sherry, and even Tofu is really a love letter to the fans. Though I do wonder where Ada is in all of this, and if we'll see her in DLC or future games again. I mean, it was very strange not seeing her in this game, considering she's been in every game that I've played that's featured Leon Kennedy, and I feel like she's just kind of integral to pushing his story forward. Though, who knows what the future holds for that. Overall, I think Resident Evil Requiem is a fantastic game. From start to finish, this game is worth your money. If you haven't played it yet, and you're even slightly curious, I highly recommend you go out, buy this game, give it a try. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Well, I think that's all I have to say for this video, even though there's still so much more I could say about this game. I really want to keep it short and sweet for you guys, and I really hope you've enjoyed. Feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. Let me know any feedback or any content you might want to see in the future, as my channel is relatively new. Any support is greatly appreciated, guys. I mean, nobody really watches these videos. This is going to be the first video on my channel in a while. I've kind of gone and deleted the other ones, you know. They didn't really get too many views, and that's fine. I'm kind of just doing this for fun. Hopefully I can continue this journey with you guys and focus on survival horror and various other games, as I do play a lot of video games, so it's not just survival horror, but I think I'm going to stick to the survival horror kick I'm on for now and continue with some videos about maybe Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 4, and 7 and 8. I think it would be nice to take a look at every single game in the modern era of this franchise and just give my thoughts here in 2026, just see how they've stuck with me over the years. Hopefully I can go and play the classic games one day, and I would like to branch out into some other things in the future. I've got so many ideas in my head, but one thing at a time. So really, thank you if you made it this far, and seriously, please let me know any feedback or advice you guys might have. Thank you for watching, and until next time.